Hey friends, the other day Artosis dropped about a 2-minute long video about the Medtech, this healing unit, which seems pretty interesting, and it exposes some interesting RTS design ideas that I want to talk about a little bit. So we're going to do that, but before I do that, please reminder to like, comment, and subscribe. Do all those things because it really helps this out if you want more analysis of Stormgate, more interviews with people behind the scenes, all that kind of thing. Really, it does help out. But for now, let's take a look at the Medtech. So we're going to take a look at this video first, right? We have the Medtech spawning in, then we're going to talk about what this means from a design perspective a little bit. And we can see, first of all, that it has a ranged attack, which, you know, yeah, it's killing chickens, but we can see it's doing the Lancer right here. It doesn't really seem to be doing that much damage, which is, I think, is important here. This is a spellcaster first and foremost. Yes, it has a damage ability. We'll talk about that in a second. But the fact that it has this shot that it shoots actually is a pretty significant thing, because what that means is your Medtechs are actually going to be able to sit further back. This was a quality of life adjustment that we saw in previous StarCraft games, added eventually to High Templar, things of that nature. Technically, sentries have the same thing. So that's nice, right? It means that you're going to be able to maintain some spacing without really having to actively micro, which, again, good thing. The other thing that we look at here is that it seems like, well, they talk about that there is very little energy per Medtech. So it will be able to heal units early game, but you're not going to have as much healing available in your army as you might have with StarCraft 2, with a Terran army or something like that, because you don't have that much, nearly as much healing per Medtech, and it's not burst healing. It's a status effect that's applied for healing over time, which is, again, kind of interesting. And the important thing there is, actually, let's pause this for a second because the video is getting ahead of me. The important thing there is that it means if you want significant healing at the early game, now as it gets into the mid game, we do have that Nanoswarm second ability, which seems to provide more. But if you're in the early game, you're not going to want to buy a bunch of these because that really will significantly diminish your offensive capabilities. But on the flip side, it means you will not be able to heal up your entire army like 3 Medivects can for a bunch of bio in StarCraft 2 or something like that, which again leads to decision efficiency or decision optimization. You're going to have to figure out what you want, and then what is kind of the key target to heal there, which I think is pretty cool. Of course, Nanoswarm is also a fun thing, and that is, of course, the ability that, let's actually scrub back a second. That is this ability that heals the units cast on and everyone around it, and it honestly doesn't really seem to heal that quickly, all things considered. It's not much of a burst heal. And the cool thing about it is that if you cast it on an enemy, it actually does damage in an AoE. So it's like a lighter weight parasitic bomb, if you want to, again, take that StarCraft comparison, or an AoE heal, but it's not both. And then, of course, there's this system shock idea, which I guess, I mean, I'm assuming it actually doesn't seem like there's an animation into it just yet. I mean, we can kind of see it on some units, and that is an anti-buff. So it removes debuffs from your friends, from your allies, and buffs removes buffs from your opponents. So here's the actual breakdown of it. And again, it seems like System Shock, it's going to linger a little bit. Actually, I'm not sure whether it's going to linger. I assumed it was going to linger, but it might not. But it removes buffs, debuffs. But the thing here, the other thing I wanted to talk about, outside of having guaranteed range, so your Medtechs stay back, and this kind of decision optimization of where exactly do you heal, when do you heal, who do you heal, how many of these do you get? Because I assume they're not going to be the cheapest from a supply perspective, is this idea that everything but the med patch, but that kind of basic unit that apparently is on the Z, is going to be a upgrade. So you want Nanoswarm, you want System Shock, those things are going to be available through some upgrade structure. Not really sure what that is, at least this is my understanding. If I'm wrong, let me know in the comments down below. But what this means is, based on the game, you can you're either going to be able to get Nanoswarm, or you're going to be able to get System Shock, and then eventually you're going to round out your tech tree in the late game. And that means this is harder to control as the game goes later. It adds more complexity, more decision making as your armies get bigger as the game goes on, which I think is useful, right? If you have a unit that does everything in the early game, I mean, that's not interesting. We see that with the Raven, kind of, again, from the StarCraft perspective, where it can kind of do everything and generally is going to have enough energy for at least some of that everything. But by gating it behind, you can have a unit that becomes progressively more powerful, but still has that early game. And that's one of the things that Frost Giant has spoken about. They want units in the early game that are good to have late game utility Lancer shields, double time on the Exo, so they run fast and they double shot, things of that nature. And it seems like Medtech is kind of on this same path, which I think is really cool, right? You're making an aggressive push and you want to make sure you have that healing. You upgrade Nanoswarm and you get this Nanoswarm timing on all your melee units. You run a bunch of Lancers in and you drop Nanoswarms on top of them. They're that much tankier. Or you're playing defensively and your opponent's pushing into you with a bunch of melee units. You drop a Nanoswarm on them. Or your opponent is attacking with a bunch of debuffs that, I don't know, make your army slower. You get System Shock, right? It has that decision possibility, and it's and just because you have Medtechs does not mean Medtechs are going to be the same every time. So that's what I wanted to talk about. Having range, having decision paralysis, and not having enough energy to do all of that. It adds decision making, it adds complexity without really hurting kind of the ability to just get the unit, which I think is pretty cool. So again, if you want more content like this or more interviews like we did with the CEO of Hathora the other day, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that wonderful jazz, and I'll see you next time.